So let's listen.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi.
So welcome back. So excited to do this second session. So last week, we started with the actual sutra. We took the entire 1 hour and we just had one sutra. Today also the situation is going to be like that. We can hardly cover one more sutra, because if you take one sutra in the entire Patanjali Yoga Sutra domain of 195 sutra, this probably is the most important sutra. And this sutra, which is the second sutra of the first chapter, covers the entire vision of the yoga. So rather than a superficial study of the sutra, we wanted to take our time and understand the scope of this sutra very well. It's very important. Once you understand this sutra, the rest of the 193 sutra is an elaboration of this one sutra. So please pay your full attention, and please note that this is a sudden immersion. We are going to introduce the whole concept in one sutra. So it might sound like a little bit overwhelming. So please forgive me for that. And we can use the Q&A to clarify any amount of questions here. And even we can try to elaborate that next week a little bit more. So with that word of caution, but once you understand this whole literature seems to be very simple, and you will be able to understand it very properly. That is what the promise is. This sutra, most of the times it is misinterpreted, and people make it too complicated, etc. So we need to study this sutra. If we need to study the Yoga Sutra, we need to study this sutra properly. So with that introduction, let's move on. And I will pause in between, and we can have anything you need to clarify. Please feel free to interrupt me, because this is very important. So with that, let's move on to the topics. So if you really look at the Samadhi Pada, we already covered the first sutra, which was the statement of intent. And we are going into the second topic, which is the definition of yoga. What is yoga is defined in these sutras, 2 to 4. And today we are going to get a high-level overview of the Sutra 2. So this is what the introduction. And we saw the first sutra, which is the statement of intent. We spent the last 1 hour, last week, 1 whole hour. Atha yoga anushasanam. So this vision of the yoga is reintroduced. It's anushasanam, not shasanam. The original Vedic teaching of yoga was systematized and reintroduced by Patanjali with a prayerful attitude to the committed students. So we saw that in detail last week. And the yoga referred in this chapter is samadhi, not the union. If you remember that, we spent a lot of time on that topic also. So don't worry about that. We are going to see what is that yoga is, but this was the first sutra. So with that, let's go to the topic of today's discussion, which is the second sutra. So this is the second sutra is, let's listen to the chanting and then go from there.
Yogaścittavṛttinirodhaḥ.
If you don't remember any other sutras, please try to remember this sutra. Yogaścittavṛttinirodhaḥ. Yogaścittavṛttinirodhaḥ. Probably this is the most important sutra in the whole Yoga Sutra literature, because it gives an end-to-end vision of the yoga vision. So let's try to understand it. Yogaha, meaning yoga. Chitta. Chitta means your internal instruments, or what you typically call collectively as the mind, is known as chitta. Vritti means the modifications. Nirodha means complete mastery. So yoga is defined as a complete mastery of your mental modifications. This is how the sutra is typically introduced. But if you remember the study of sutra, you need to unpack and elaborate each of these verses and try to understand the deeper meaning. And that's what we are going to do now. So we are going to come back to the sutra for the overall meaning, but on a high level, understand that yoga is defined as a complete mastery of all my mental modifications. So what is this yoga? So the first sutra, we already introduced the statement of intent. And the second sutra defines yoga as the complete mastery. And as I said, the yoga can mean two different meanings are there for the word yoga. Means the popular meaning people use is union of your union with the higher self or the self-realization. But the meaning used in this verse or in this sutra is Samadhi or Nirodha. So then the most important part of this sutra is it gives the entire vision of the Yoga Sutra. So this sutra is very important. So let's try to understand. So let's try to understand each of the component or each of the words mentioned in this sutra. The first word or the first component we wanted to understand is citta. So those who speak Hindi, this is not chit, it is citta. Because in Hindi, you have a tendency to omit that final a. So this is not like that, citta. The word citta has different meaning in different context. And in the context of Yoga Sutra, it means the inner instrument, antakarana. So in the vision of yoga, just like you have external instruments, sense organs to interact with the world, you have an inner instrument. And that inner instrument is known as antakarana. And the external instruments are known as bahya karana. Karana means it is an instrument you use to interact with the world. For example, eye is a bahya karana. And why do I use eye? To see the vision. So karana is an instrument associated with your body to interact with the world outside or to manage a particular function. That is the definition of karana. Karana means it's an instrument. Karanas can be of two types. One is bahya karana, the other one is antakarana. So the bahya karanas are your 5 organs of actions and the 5 organs of perceptions. So this is bahya karana. And then you can use the external instruments to enhance the capability of your karana. And that is known as upakarana. For example, you can use a microscope to enhance your ability to see things means loudly or clearly. Or you can use a telescope. You can use a hearing aid. All these are known as upakarana. Upakarana enhances the power of a karana. So this is the point. So just like there is external instrument, there is an internal instrument. That internal instrument is known as, on a high level, you can call it as manas or mind, and that is what is known as citta. So citta is the internal instrument you possess, which helps you to interact with the world. And this citta has 3 components. So if you studied Vedanta, there is that Vedanta model has 4 components. But the Sankhya and the Yoga model, it's only a model, right? It's a functional model of your mind. So based upon this functional model of your mind, citta refers to the overall mind and which has 3 different components. The first component is known as manaha, which is your coordinating factor, which collects input from all the sensory systems and route it to the appropriate areas. And this is the place which categorizes and routes all your sensory inputs, your interaction with the sense organs, everything is coordinated by this faculty. And this is the faculty of all your feeling units. This is known as mana. Bhuti means your rational intelligence, the intelligence which helps you to think. So to think and make sure that you are making a decision using the memory, using your knowledge, this is known as Bhuti. And then there the third component is called ahankara. Ahankara means, aham means I, kara means activity. It gives you a sense of I-ness. Like, I am happy, this is Rajesh, or this is, I'm a male. All that feeling, individuality is created by this ahankara. So your entire inner instruments or your mind has three components. One is known as manaha, which is the sensor coordinating faculty, buddhi, which is your intelligent faculty, and ahankara, which is the sense of I-ness. In my slides, I put detailed reference for you to understand this, what exactly each one of this. So you can refer this, but on a high level, buddhi is the faculty of intelligence. It comes from the root buddh, to means to know, to wake up. Even the name Buddha came from that root. Buddh means to know, the person who knows everything. And buddhi, or the intelligence, is that function of the chitta which produces, means it does the discernment, it generates knowledge, it connects the dots together. It is the rational thinking faculty. And this is the most powerful faculty because this is what helps us to grow. So this is buddhi on a high level. We don't need to go through this in detail, but I just put the bullet points for your reference. Ahankara means it is the functions. It is that function of your mind which gives the self-identity. Always people think that this is bad. Definitely it is not bad. If that ahankara is not there, there is no existence for you. There is a disease. So the ahankara is not bad. First of all, think that. Only thing is that you need to understand who you are properly. So the ahankara is not bad. And if the ahankara is not there, it is a mental disease. It generates the feelings of I-ness, minus, and I am happy, I am sad, etc. This is very important aspect in living your life and transacting with the world outside. But the problem is, in your current state, the ahankara has a limited view of yourself. So what you need to do is you have to have an enhanced understanding of who you are. That's all we need. In a lot of people, after studying spiritual practice, they say that you have to kill your ahankara. No. If you kill the ahankara, you're killing yourself. So please don't think that way. You're giving your ahankara a larger scope, a larger dimension. That's all. So in summary, what I'm saying is the chitta is your mind. Holistically, you see the mind with three functions. One function is to receive sensory inputs. Sorry, that is the third component, mind, the internal coordinator. So the internal coordinator, or the manaha component, it receives input from all the external sense system. For example, if I see you, right, what happens? My eyes will capture the image and it goes to the mind. It is the mind that sends that to the intellect. So it organizes all the sensory input and directs accordingly. And also, like, if the ahankara send a signal, I want to go somewhere or I want to speak, it is the mind that instructs my physical organ of speech to talk. So it is the sensory coordinator. Again, it's a functional model. Please don't compare with the neurological model. That's what the idea is here. This is a model to represent your mind. So your mind is modeled as three functions. Everything the mind does will fit into one of these categories. One is the rational thinking faculty. The second one is the sense of individuality. And the third one is the sensory coordination. So this is what your mind is. And this mind probably is the most important faculty in your life. Because really speaking, think through this, really speaking, The other sense organs are like sensors. In your computer, you may have a physical camera, but if that camera don't have a corresponding software to control, it is useless. So the Upanishads clearly tells us, mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo. It is the mind that lifts somebody higher, or it is the mind that pulls somebody down. Bhagavad Gita also tells, the 6th chapter, Krishna tells, a person who has a controlled mind, a mind in his hand, that mind becomes his best friend because it elevates him to the higher state. But a person who do not have the mind in his hand, the mind becomes the worst enemy. Just pause and think for a second. Just pause and think for a second. Am I bluffing, or is that not true? If your mind is in your hand, you know you are in control. If your mind is not in your hand, you will not progress. Forget about the spirituality. Even in the material world, this mind determines your growth or fall down. True? Any comments or questions? So that's why yoga considers mind as the most important area to work on. Because if you don't have control over the mind, it is like you driving a car without controlling over the wheels. Any comments? Okay, so up to this, you are with me. So chitta refers to the mind on a holistic level.
Rajeshji, can I ask something if you don't mind?
Please.
Yeah. Just I know you gave a fair warning that don't connect it with the neurological function, but that's what just come to my mind like right away. Like, see, all the three parts that you just defined can be connected to the functions of brain, right? Like all the manobhuti, ahankara. So obviously, like anything, like if I lose my sense of identity, when we see like that ahankara, basically some part of my brain is not working. We can do that way too. So is it like, is that what the intention here is? Or as you said, it has nothing to do with that. It is a different, as a mind, as a separate entity, we are like now referring this.
It is certainly a different entity. So the neurological aspect is totally different. Because see, these are two different models. So I'm going to park it to the 12 minutes, immediately to the 12 o'clock. This is the first question we will take, but this is an interesting question. What is the difference between the neurological definition versus the yogic definition? So the model, we will understand this very thoroughly, okay? But very important topic. This is just another model, and that's why I qualified this model as a functional model.
There is also another model that is currently being more used. It started with Freud, that he identified the ego and the self.
Yeah,
especially in humanistic psychology.
Right.
Yeah,
that model is totally different. That's a different model of Freud, and means later point of time it changes. So that's a psychological model, and Rathika, what you said is a neurological model, and this is a yogic model. Every model has its own validity, and the definition of model itself is it's an abstract representation of the reality. No model is the actuality. Every model is defined for studying a particular aspect, right? So a fashion designer, when he models a human being, it is totally different from a anatomical model. So depending upon the purpose, you define the model. So this model is the yogic psychology, and this yogic psychology defines three functions of your inner instrument. But I will definitely connect this to the neurological model, because personally I have fascination for both the model. So I will definitely answer that.
Thanks, Rajesh.
Okay, great. So let's move on. The next topic is very important. So we talked about the chitta. So chitta is a combination of three functions, which is sensory coordination and connection. Second one is the sense of individuality. And the third one is the discernment or the analysis or the rationalization faculty. This is the manaha, buddhihi, ahankaraha. Together forms the chitta. So this is the whole idea. So those who are familiar with the Vedantic model, means Vedanta has a four-fold division. So don't get confused. It's a different model, but this model is really good. And this is what the Sankhya Yoga model. Just a word of caution. Every model, there can be multiple model representing the same fact. Only thing is that you need to understand based upon the model. So please keep that in mind. So having said that, but just a word of observation. We know that this model was developed 2,500 years back. Look at the level of depth of analysis. And right now we are on the scratching the surface. When I go to the next level, you will see the depth of human psychological analysis. So we cannot say that Freud or that means those people were the father of modern psychology. This is psychology. If this is not psychology, what else is psychology? So let's go to the second component, vrittis. Vrittis came from the verbal root vrit. Vrit means circle. That is, means you might have heard in your local Indian languages, vrittam, right? Vrittam means circle. Anybody heard of that word? Circle, vrittam. Or like it means to turn, or it terms to resolve. And it's like the in a water, right? The ripples in a water, all that can be considered as vrittis. So vrittis refers to the modification of the content of the mind. So any permutation happening in the content of the mind is called vritti. So let's take an example. Let's not go very abstract. Means we all know that so many things are happening in your mind at a given point of time. Let's say you are closing your eyes right now and listening to me. Let's say that that's what is happening right now. What happens? Your ears will capture my sound, and in your mind, means what happens? That representation will happen. So that's a modification of your mind. This is the yogic model. When you see something, what happens? The eyes will capture your image from the world, and that will be represented as a particular modification in your mind. And to be honest with you, that's exactly what you are seeing. Isn't it very complicated? Absolutely not, right? So you can think about your mind as a theater with multiple dimensions. At any point of time, you are looking at the screen of that theater. What is projected into that screen is the mental modifications. So let's take a typical example. Right now, I'm talking about this. So one portion of the screen definitely means you will hear. Means screen means it is the sound, everything, right? So that is what is represented in your mind. So when you hear this word, right, you may think that, oh, this is wrong because the science talks something else. Another portion of your mind will tell. That is another vritti parallelly happening in your mind. Suddenly you hear a sound. Your daughter studying something. You may think that, oh my God, she's delayed with your SAT. That is another representation happening, another ripple happening. So at any given point of time, right, there could be multiple ripples happening in your mind. And wherever you pay attention, you see that ripple. This is your experience at any given point of time. This is your representation at any point of time. Some of this would be small ripples. Some of them would be like a huge tsunami. You hear a fire alarm happening. It's like a tsunami. So many thoughts will come to your mind, you will just drop everything else and act on that. But what we are trying to say here is, vrittis refers to the mental modification, and these mental modification, and that is what gives you every experience. Some of these mental modifications would be due to the external sensory perception, and some of these external modification, so the internal modification of the mind is due to the corresponding thinking, and some of them could be due to your intellectual thinking. Some of them would be some of your past experience. For example, your boss didn't smile at you when you go to the work. Yes, that is one representation. But another ripple may pop up immediately. What? Oh, I might have done something wrong. That is another ripple. That ripple may create another ripple. So what is happening in the field of my chitta is modification constantly. Some of these modifications are good for me. Some of these modifications are bad for me. Some of these modifications would be like, okay, controlled. Some of them would be completely uncontrolled. Right? Some of them, I may invite these modification. For example, if I want to speak something, I initiated that modification. Sometimes what happens? These modifications comes by its own. But at any point of time, whatever is my experience at a given point of time, it depending upon the modification of the mind at that point of time. As I said, some of these modifications are externally triggered. Some of them are internally triggered. So it's like, so the yogic literature tells, like when you look at a sky, you can see multiple clouds. And you can say that, okay, a few clouds look like a rabbit. A few clouds look like a dragon. So the ripples are happening always in your mind, and you see that. And that is what your experience at any given point of time. In other words, these vrittis, which are the modifications of your mind, it is the activity of your manaha. Manaha means it is the sensory inputs or sensory outputs, or it could be the activities of your intellect, which is your thinking faculty. It could be the activity of your ahankara. Any of these three components are capable of creating mental modification. And at any point of time, what you feel or what you see is the collective mental modifications. Is it clear? This model is clear. This is what yoga tells. So in the screen of your mind, which is capable of vision, sound, feeling, touch, everything. That's why I said, like, it's a multi-dimensional theater with all the facilities. Whatever projected, whatever sound comes in, or whatever sense of touch you feel, that is what your experience is. And sometimes what happens, you may have multiple modifications of your mind, but you may pay attention only to one thing. That means even though the other things are happening, you may not even aware of that. When you play poker, your spouse might be calling you from behind. You may not even hear. Why? Even though that comes into your mind, my attention is entirely on the poker. That is the reason. So this is the whole psychology of yoga. So the yoga tells me that it is the vrittis that gives me all the experiences. So a beautiful example used by Swami Vivekananda, none other than Swami Vivekananda. He tells vrittis are emotions, thoughts, or the contents of your mental awareness at any given point of time. And he uses a brilliant example. He tells, if chitta is a lake, the content of that lake, the water, means the content of the mind. For example, when I see a person, the image of that person is the water, and vrittis are the modifications of that water. This is a brilliant definition. The content of your mind is the content of the chitta. Vrittis are nothing but the modifications of the water. So in other words, I'm using Vivekananda's exact words. He tells vrittis give scope to the mind to express all the feelings, whether it is sadness or anger or emotion, any other emotions, jealous, hatred, everything is represented as a vritti. So if, for example, if I feel jealous, what happens? A mental modification should have happened in my mind, and that is what is giving me that feeling. If I feel sad, some modifications would have happened in my mind, that is a sad vritti. So it gives a scope to express emotions, thoughts, feelings, everything. This is what the idea of vrittis are. Any questions?
Yeah, namaste, Rajesh.
Yes.
So can we say that this is the whole part of the meditation? Like meditation is like a water lake, and then all the thoughts that comes as vrittis, like bubbles and this and that. So, and depending on what kind of thought comes, it could be the whirlpool or can we put it
Absolutely.
that way?
Absolutely. We are going in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Step by step. But first you need to understand, right? So if your mind is like a lake, every vritti will create a ripple, and you identify something with that. So as I said, like it's like a theater screen. Some of the vrittis happening to be funny to me. Some of the vrittis happening to be jealous to me. Some of the vrittis happens to be extremely painful to me. So depending upon the vrittis happening in my mind, I get different experiences.
Rajeshji, I had a question about vrittis.
Yeah.
Is it possible that two different people, two different minds, are looking at the same theater screen but feeling totally different vrittis?
Absolutely. Good question, right? So what happens is this theater screen is internal. So it is who projects there. My mind projects there. So let's say that an external event, I'm throwing a stone into a lake. Let's say that it's an external event, right? Let's say that, for example, you and I are watching one movie. So your mind project a certain component more emotionally than my mind. So why your mind projection is different than my mind? For example, let's say that you read so many news every day in the world. For example, right now you heard that a flood is going on in Kerala. It's a big news. So suppose you don't have any relatives in Kerala. The same news got you, but the vritti is created. Okay, you might be sympathetic to the people there. But imagine that your parents are living in a place and they are affected by this flood. So A, nobody lives in that state. B, what happens? The same situation was there, but even though that the vrittis would be totally different.
Yes.
So what he sees in his mind versus what A sees in his mind will be totally different.
Yes.
So it constitutes different things. Different things determines what exactly is going to be the vrittis that are happening in my mind. The state transition of the vrittis will be dependent upon my own upbringing, my own past experiences, my own value. So there are different things would determine. My own attachment, my own relationship with people, all determines what exactly is going to be the vritti. So the same event, to your point, Arnab, can create different vrittis in different people. That is one thing. Second thing is, the same event can create different set of vrittis for me in different time periods. See, as a child, let's say that if I see a balloon burst, what would be the vrittis coming to me? A tsunami will comes to me, right? I feel that everything is lost. But as an adult, you may get a laugh.
Yeah, it's not.
Right? So different time periods, different situations, different things constitute what exactly I'm going to project on my screen. Sensory input is only one. But one thing is for sure. What is projected on my screen is going to determine my experience. So now what is the skill you have to do? I need to tune my mind in such a way that only the appropriate things are projected on my mental screen. So one thing people try to do is what? They try to avoid all the situation. But that's not in your hand. The skill you have is, how can you control these vrittis in such a way that whatever that is projected to my mental screen are only beneficial, only uplifting, only positive things. That is the skill yoga is going to teach you. Understand? Rather than just giving it for a chance. So how can I reprogram my internal mental processes so that whatever vritti is happening in my mind are good, progressive, uplifting? Now, I may have control over everybody. I may have control over my car. I may have control over my children. I may have control over my boss. I may have control over my everything. But if I don't have control over my mind, what is the freedom you are talking?
Rajeshji, just want to make sure that I understand the concept clearly,
Please.
if you don't mind. So basically, it is like whatever we talk about the vritti is the output of, like, it's not like it's not the input, it's rather an output. Like as you example, in the ripples in the water. So if the pond is still, then if you throw, then the ripple will be moved. But if it is like a lot of waves, obviously it is not going to. The ripple is not controlled. It will happen, but how it happens depend on. How we are. I don't know whether.
Absolutely. That's exactly the next
or whatever you are saying.
No, that is the next topic. That is the next topic. So this is the beauty of the yoga, is it is take you to the whatever questions you have, it is addressed in the next topic. It's very systematic. So right now, what we are saying is, what is projected on your mental screen is what is going to determine your experience. And what is projected on your mental screen is your vrittis. Rathika, you answered ask the next question. Now, the question is exactly the same thing I'm going to talk. Why? Why my mind projects these vrittis? Why somebody's mind projects in a different way? Look at it. Let me take a cricket example. You need 20 runs in an over. A batsman is standing there. Two people. Mahendra Singh Dhoni and another person. And that another person is more skilled than Dhoni. But his mind is too anxious. What does that mean? The vrittis projected by his mind is too anxiety. So what happens? He cannot execute his task. So the Dhoni, he had control. He kept his cool. So he had more ability on his emotions and thoughts. See, emotions are always good as long as they're in the right amount. Daniel Goleman, in his famous book called Emotional Intelligence More Than IQ, he tells emotions are extremely good for us. When he gives a brilliant definition. The brilliant definition is they are appropriate and proportional to circumstances. A little bit of anxiety is always good to study for SAT or to prepare for your exam or to prepare for your deadline. But if too much anxiety is there, what is going to happen? It won't work. But the point here we are saying is that whatever I experience, even if it is anxiety, depression, or anything, it is determined by the type of vrittis that happened in my mind. So if that is the case, we need to understand this one diagram represents the entire yogic model. So look at the left-hand side, this portion. This is you, the consciousness. The whole model tells that you as the consciousness is just sitting and watching what is happening in your mental screen, which is the vrittis. So more than what is happening in the external world, what you are directly watching is what is represented in your mind as vrittis. So the entire world, whatever happening in the world, it is represented as vrittis, right? And all your thinking, it is represented as vrittis. All your emotions is represented as vrittis. All your likes, dislikes, everything is represented as vrittis. So whatever that is projected in the screen of your mind as vrittis, that is what is your direct experience. And now the next question is, as Radhika said, who determines these vrittis? Multiple components. Sometimes you may get some input from the external world, sensory world. Sometimes it will come to the manas, and the manas, it may go to the intellect, and in intellect may, okay, suppose I see a snake. It comes to the mind, that goes to the intellect, and the intellect, oh, in my memory it is stored and this is dangerous, run. So that vrittis will be created. So along with the vision of the snake, you will get another vritti, which is that fear, and instruct to run. So sometimes the ahankara will contribute to certain vrittis. Sometimes the intellect will contribute to the vrittis. Sometimes the manas, means consultation with the memory, it contributes to vrittis. Sometimes the manas input is triggered by the external events. But this diagram, if you think, you understand the whole yogic model of the vrittis. Vrittis are the mental modification. It is whatever that is projected into your mental screen. And what generates the vrittis are, it could be your intellect, it could be the ahankara, it could be the manas, or it could be the memory, or it could be the external sense organs. And the consciousness, you, is observing all these things. This is what is happening. Look at the yogic psychology. 2,500 years back. Imagine, just appreciate that. This is too big. Even now, nobody can question this. So now,
I had a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So in the chittam part, you have 4 components: intellect, manas, ahankar, and then memory. So is that intellect the buddhi?
Yes, intellect is the buddhi, ahankara is the individuality, and manas, memory combined, is known as manaha. So good point. I will tag it appropriately, the Sanskrit word also. Intellect is buddhi, ahankara is the individuality, manas and memory put together, it is known as manas, mind and memory. I called out memory separately because sometimes you pull out content from the memory. So this is what it is. Now, if this is the case, this is how you operate. What is the problem? The problem is, I think that was again Radhika's question. Why the vrittis are happening the way that is happening, right? Why certain things creates extreme vrittis in me? Sometimes why certain events are not creating any vrittis in me? What determines the quality and the quantity of the vrittis happening in me? Because if the quality and the quantity of the vrittis are correct, then I can lead an efficient life. But if the vrittis are wrong, it can pull me down. So what is the cause? So remember, step by step, we started with chittam, yogaha, chitta vritti nirodha. Please keep that in mind. That is the springboard framework. So yoga means mastery of the vrittis coming out of your chitta. So we try to understand what is chitta. Chitta is your mind, internal organ or the mind, which constitutes of 3 functions, which is manaha, buddhihi, ahankaraha, right? And then vrittis we understood is the modifications of any of these components. any modifications initiated by mind, any modifications initiated by intellect, any modifications initiated by ego. It is, or ego, or means I would rather use the word ahankara rather than ego, because ego has a different connotation in the modern world. So ahankara. So anything or initiated by ahankara. And this is what determines my experiences. So now, if you move further down, okay. Now, what is the nature of these mental modifications? So we know that vrittis is what gives me experiences. What exactly is the nature of these mental modifications? Here Patanjali tells the nature of the mental modification, right? What exactly the modifications happened in my mind is determined by the content of my citta. The content of my mind, right? The content of my mind is going to determine what type of modifications I have. For example, let me give you one simple example. And we see, again, this is a sudden immersion to the whole topic. So if you don't understand this completely, it's okay. The next 193 sutras are going to give you all the details. So please keep that in mind. Here we are going to get a jump start of the whole yoga. That is why it appears to be a little bit overwhelming. That word of caution is always there. So let's say that if you have a value, right? You have a strong value in your mind. What is that value? I won't hurt anybody. Or every day I read 30 minutes, or I pray 30 minutes, or I don't steal any money. So what happens? If you get an opportunity, if you have a strong value of that, what is going to happen? The modification is going to be determined by that value. Second thing, you have a lot of love for your child. 15 people's SAT score you came today. But your child SAT score, that created a larger reaction or a vrittis in your mind. Why? Because there is some content in your mind, which is your attachment or love for your child. So definitely the content, what exactly is the content in my mind at a given point of time, whether it is conscious or unconscious, it doesn't matter. That is going to determine the type of vrittis that are going to happen in your mind. This is very scientific and logical. So in the yogic model, you classify the entire contents of the mind or the entire material world into 3 different categories. It is known as Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Understand these words right now. We are going to explain this whole thing. And anybody wants to understand this in detail, you can refer Bhagavad Gita chapter 14. One whole chapter is dedicated for this. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Again, see any analysis, right? Any data analysis requires you need to classify data into multiple dicing and slicing. And then you try to analyze it. That is the good old model, even in the modern world. So using that classification model, you classify the whole citta into Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. See, so in his commentary of Yoga Sutra, Maharshi Vyasa starts say that Chittam hi trigunam prajna pravritti sthiti shilatvat. This is the Sanskrit commentary. Chittam hi trigunam. The entire content of the mind can be classified into 3: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So the content, the tamas sattvic content of your mind, it keeps the mind in its natural state, right? It keeps the mind aligned with the dharma. Dharma is not religion. Dharma means doing what needs to be done. That's it. So for example, if you have more sattvic content in your mind, you will be mindful of your eating. right? Your eating will be appropriate. More than taste, you would give what is good for your health. The 6th means you should read the 16th and 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So 3 chapters means 14, 16, and 17 gives a detail. Bhagavad Gita brilliantly defines what exactly you eat. Krishna didn't say that you should eat this food, you should not eat that food. He never said that. He said, you need to eat what is good for your body, that gives more life. That is what he said. Remember, people try to put, okay, you cannot eat this, you cannot eat that. He didn't say that. Go to the book and see. He said, that nourishes your body, that gives more life, that rejuvenates you. That is sattvic food. So if you have more sattva, when you go, rather than a sweet, you take a good dish, right? When a situation comes, how do you react is completely determined upon the sattvic content. If the sattva content is more, you would be more in line with the dharma. Dharma means doing what needs to be done. So this more sattva content will make your mind calm. It will make your mind more creative. The vritti is more creative, and it will make your content more peaceful. Now, rajas, the second category of content, it takes the mind to a hyperactive state. It will make the mind a little bit agitated. It will be a little bit worried, a little bit anxious. Is the rajas bad? No, sometimes you need that. So everybody, even a master like Krishna or a Patanjali, they may have a little bit of rajas. Without that rajas, you cannot function in the world. So rajas means makes you a little bit hyperactive, little bit stressed, little bit anxious. Is stress good and bad, good or bad? Think through that. Somebody said that stress is bad. That is wrong. You need a little bit of stress. So this is what is rajas. But the rajas should be under the control of sattva. Like suppose little bit of stress is good, but always stress is a problem. So rajas should be under the control of sattva. The good example is, don't you need if you are using a manual shift car, don't you need a first gear? But if you drive always in the first gear, the car is gone. So stress should be little bit, hyperactivity should be little bit. Otherwise, you cannot achieve anything in this world. You cannot fight a situation. You need that. But that is why God has given us rajas. But the problem is the proportion. Stress is required, but always stress is not bad. So rajas refers to that. Now tamas, sometimes you need inactivity. That content will take you to the dull, deluded, or foolish, or sometimes inactive state. Everybody has a little bit of tamas. See, as long as you have a body, a little bit of tamas is there. Inactivity is required. Don't you need a little bit of rest? So you cannot have sleep if the tamas is not there. So tamas again is required. But if you sleep 14 hours, that is not good. So that should be controlled by sattva. So what Patanjali is saying here is, the content of your mind determines the vrittis, and the contents can be of 3 types: sattva, rajas, and tamas. The sattva is the content that gives like the purity, it is the natural state. Rajas and tamas should be exceptional state, but for a normal human being, ideal proportion is what? Maximum sattva, little bit of rajas, even little bit of down tamas. But let's say that a person has rajas maximum, little bit of sattva and tamas, he will be a workaholic. He will be working 24/7 and break himself down completely. He will be living an anxious life. He will be living a very stressful life. Tamas means what? That person would be, either he will be sleeping, a lazy fellow or a crooked fellow. So this content of your mind is going to determine what type of vrittis are happening, and this can be of 3 types. So this is a very important topic. We will see this in detail, but an introduction here. Now the vrittis, all the thoughts are a combination of these. You cannot say that one vritti is entirely swatik. Exceptions are there, yes, but most of the vrittis would be a combination of these 3 gunas. A beautiful example, 3 primary colors combining forms the entire spectrum of colors. How many colors are there? Anybody knows? How many colors are there? Combination, permutation, combination.
Infinite.
Millions of colors. And from where these colors comes in? 3 colors. So the different permutation and combination of these 3 colors makes up the entire universe of different colors. So the entire vritti, if you take any vritti, you can see that, okay, this may have 80% sattva, 12% rajas, 3% tamas. So this is what constitute every vritti. So the content of the chitta and every vritti, right? Vrittis are content of chitta, the modification of the content, and that every modification will be a combination of these 3 gunas. Again, please forgive me if it is too much overwhelming. We are going to see this in detail. Now, what is the impact of these vrittis? So if it is a swatik predominant vritti, the mind is like the top, the first case. Like we said, right? If the chitta is like a lake, vrittis are ripple. The vrittis will be calm, and you can see the reflections of the sun beautifully. You can make it out. If it is too much rajas, you can see a huge vritti. So that is the time you may not be able to think properly. You may have to execute it. It is good when you are facing an emergency. But if your mind is always like this, it is not good. Tamas means you can see that it could be dirty. And again, it is not good. Tamas predominant. Again, please keep in mind that every vritti means you need to have tamas, little bit of rajas, but it should be in line with sattva. So what we are demonstrating here is a rajas-oriented mind and a tamas-oriented mind. The chitta vrittis would be completely out of control. So what is the purpose of yoga here? Yoga tells me on one more point. So sattva means it is your natural state. The activities are there, but it is the modifications are there, but it's very natural. Rajasic means too much of activity. Tamasic means no activity, no thinking, like deluded, foolish, hijacked state. So what the first goal is, if you're a tamasic oriented person or a rajasic oriented person, how can I move towards the sattva oriented person? Again, we are not saying that not to kill all rajasic activity, not to kill all the tamasic activity. Without that, there won't be any life, but predominantly sattvic oriented state. So the goal of the yoga is what? Maximize the presence of sattva guna in the mind and minimize rajas and tamas. In other words, rajas and tamas should be under the control of sattva. A good example Vyasa is given is, you need sleep. But the sattva content of your mind will tell that, okay, I need only 7 hours of sleep. That's it. So the tamas will be controlled by sattva. Anger, you need anger. Without anger, you will not survive in the world. But sattva, if sattva predominated mind, rajas means the anger will control you. Sattva means you will control the anger. So the rajas and tamas, always the sattva content will put checks and balances. So the purpose of yoga is what? Tamasic content means from the tamasic dominated mind, I move to rajasic dominated mind, and rajasic dominated mind to sattvic or more dominated mind. By the way, Grammatically, it is wrong to say Rajasic, Tamasic, Swatik. These are made up words. So these are, please, this is for our understanding. Sattva, because otherwise it's too difficult to say. So Tamasic oriented mind, from Tamasic oriented mind, we will evolve into Rajasic oriented mind. And from a Rajasic oriented mind, we will evolve into Swatik oriented mind. So then what is the third component? Nirodha. Nirodha means it could be mastery, or it could be control, or it could be suspension. What does that mean? So first meaning of Nirodha means avoid and eliminate. That is the first thing. What? The chitta type of vrittis. The chitta type of vrittis come from a Rajasic oriented content. If your mind is more Rajasic oriented, chitta type of vrittis will come. Remember, we talked about chitta, destructive type of extremely agitated state. So that type of vrittis you need to eliminate completely. Mudha, dull type of vrittis needs to be eliminated. So when you say chitta vritti nirodha, the word nirodha has different meaning depending upon the state you are in. If you're a tamasic or a Rajasic oriented person, the yoga practices will help you to avoid that type of vrittis. How? The sukshma sadhanas won't help you. At that time, if you ask that person to go and meditate, it will not work. So such a people, you have to tell them to do yama niyamas. You have to tell them to do pranayamas. That is the only meaning. Bhagavad Gita prescribed karma yoga to such people. So that is the first portion. So this is why this sutra covers the entire spectrum of yoga. So in the beginning stages, you have to do sthula sadhanas, which is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. That is where the hatha yoga is going to help you. So it is going to help you to eliminate some of these tamasic and rajasic content of your mind and tune your vrittis more towards swatik. And when it comes to the vikshipta means your priority is there, but you are distracted. So that is the time you go to the finer sadhana. That is where the meaning of the word nirodha becomes mastery. You try to master the art of contemplation. That is where the pratyahara, dharana, dhyana comes in. Once you reach to the state of samadhi, right? That is the state, the ekagrata will come. Samprajñāta samadhi will come. And then finally, you need something, because see, you cannot keep your mind screen empty. So the focused state means something will be there, but you are able to keep that scene for a period of time. But when it goes to nirodha, means you should have the ability to suspend even that thing. That is the meaning called suspension. Because for example, if you are meditating upon the picture of Lord Shiva, that Lord Shiva's picture is in your mind. So your consciousness will not see its own true nature. Again, it will see Shiva, it will see an uninterrupted Shiva, but it won't see who you are. That is why that is called samprajñāta samadhi. Samprajñā means knowledge. Prajñā means special knowledge or correct knowledge. Samprajñāta samadhi means special knowledge. So your knowledge about the meditated object will be there in the mind. So at that point of time, what happens? The crystal is still colored, but the color is only one. In other cases, what happens? The crystal color will keep on changing. Definitely, this is a much better state, but still it's not good enough. So the approach of yoga is, at this point of time, what happens? It will try to suspend all the other feeling. And this, when all the thoughts are suspended, consciousness will recognize itself. Only one time, and after that, it is good to go. So these are the different stages of nirodha. So now let's connect all these things together. Means I know that we have to stop now, so we are done. But chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta means your mind. Vritti means modification. Nirodha means stage by stage, you are gaining control over your mental modifications. So initial stage, you are trying to avoid all the rajasic and tamasic, chitta vrittis and mudha vrittis. And then you are trying to avoid the vikshipta vrittis. and you're trying to master the ekagra vritti. And once you, all these are nirodhas, right? So the initial nirodha is avoiding all the chitta and means vikshipta vrittis. Then come to the ekagra vritti. I'm mastering that. And finally, I'm suspending all the thoughts in your mind. The screen will be blank. At that point of time, I know that, okay, the reality that is happening is light. Everything else is a projection. So that is the final stage. And this is the final stage of yoga. So that is why this sutra gives the entire definition of the whole scope of yoga. Yogaścittavṛttinirodhaḥ. On a simple term, you can say that this is the mastery of all the mental activity. And that is yoga. And this yoga is the summary. So yoga, it is a complete mastery of all the modifications of the mind. The scope is very high. The scope is very high. It's much bigger than whatever we think. But in a step-by-step, we are going to see that. So when you talk about nirodha, initially, what is that nirodha? Vikshipta and mudha vrittis nirodha. And then egg means, chitta and mudha vrittis nirodha. From mudha vrittis nirodha, it goes to vikshipta vrittis nirodha, and mastery of the ekagra, and finally suspension of all thoughts and try to see myself. This is the entire yogic journey. And the next 193 sutra is just an elaboration of these steps. So I know that it was too much today, but this is what the Yoga Sutra is. So with that, I think we can go to the Q&A mode. We can answer any questions. I know that we have one question Radhika asked. We will answer that. But before that, any comments you want to make?
Rajesh?
Yes, Rohitji.
You mentioned the yogic model. What was the Vedanta